It's now my great pleasure to introduce Gwyneth Galbraith. So Gwyneth is a vice president of global philanthropy at JPMorgan Chase, where she helps lead strategic initiatives to accelerate business growth for underserved entrepreneurs. Gwyneth has a long history in community economic development and financial inclusion and education, and importantly hails from Berkeley, California, a hotbed of employee ownership. Gwyneth, thank you so much for being here and for closing us out today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. I have the somewhat unenviable task of following all of this, and so I'm just going to be very quick and say a big thank you to Aspen, to Rutgers, to all the speakers and all the people here who are doing so much in so many different ways to move this forward. I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said last year when I came here. This is sort of a full circle moment for me. I spent a lot of my time before I joined JPMorgan Chase working at a small business lender. One of the first loans, I was a grant writer. I wrote client stories. One of the first client stories was Emma's Echo Clean, which we made a loan to a worker cooperative at Wages, which is now Prospera. Hillary was on the board of that small business lender, and here we are today. Hillary, you're sitting there. I'm here. It feels like such both an amazing kind of full circle for me, but also just to see how much progress has been made and also how many barriers still exist. I feel really lucky to now be in this position at JPMorgan Chase to be able to support some of this amazing work, and it's so much fun to be in the room and hear all of this. JPMorgan Chase wants to help create a more inclusive and stronger economy through business and community investments. And employee ownership is an important piece of that. On the business side, I am very lucky to partner with my colleague Regina Carls, who leads our ESOP advisory group. Our ESOP portfolio is now $6.5 billion and growing. And I remember when I stood up here last year, the number that Regina gave me to say was $5 billion. So we are making progress and growing, and really excited about that work. And that's the business investment side. And on the community investment side, I sit in corporate responsibility, where we have the great fortune to be able to work with community partners to support this work. Many of you have heard me say this, but I'm going to say it again. For us, employee ownership is part of a larger strategy around succession planning and business ownership opportunities. We all know about the silver tsunami and all the ownership transitions that are getting teed up, and many of those will not go anywhere. And there's a huge threat to communities, jobs, economic activity, and then this huge opportunity to think about alternative ownership opportunities like employee ownership. And I really appreciated Philip from A&H isn't here anymore, but in his the 5 big ideas, he specifically talked about looking at this from the seller's point of view, and that's how we're approaching this. Not least of all because JPMorgan Chase has a lot of clients that are sellers, so we can be really part of this seller-driven approach. We're really proud. Well, I'm proud to get to sponsor this forum, and I'm really lucky to be here because I learned so much. I have so many notes. I wanted to share a few of my things I've learned and a few memorable moments. I've sort of scribbled them down, and half of them have been stolen because they clearly are everybody's memorable moments. So sorry, I'm going to repeat a few. But nobody's mentioned the first thing that I learned. We started off yesterday. I did not know that the first legislation around employee ownership was to help the cod industry, signed under George Washington. That was a fascinating piece of history that I am going to pull into my employee ownership pitch wherever I can. As several people have mentioned, where else do you get Bernie Sanders, representative, quoting Reagan, and Bill Cassidy talking about Karl Marx? But I think what that really shows is that there actually is common ground. We can find shared values even in these difficult and uncertain times, and that's very powerful for this work. Alex Brill talked to us yesterday morning about thinking about rearranging the pie and growing the pie. And that was, for me, that was such an interesting, I hadn't really thought about the rearranging the pie. But it's really, employee ownership is a chance to do both. Rearranging the pie, who's at the table, pick your metaphor, and then growing it from there. And so trying to do, the opportunity to do both. Another line that has been stolen already, because lots of people mentioned the idea that we need more capitalists, and the way you get more capitalists is by making more owners. I learned about incarcerated worker co-ops, which something I'd never thought about or heard about, and is absolutely fascinating. And then hearing about the healthcare co-ops. I'm going from here. I'm spending the weekend with my 87-year-old mother, who is on the verge of needing a little bit more care. And I think somebody else mentioned, this is something that hits home for all of us. It is an area where we don't appreciate the skills and the talents, and worker co-ops are one way of really moving in that direction. I learned a new word, and I don't know if Sean Matthews is still here, ESOPable and non-ESOPable. Another good way of sort of getting at the thing that I should say about our approach, JPMorgan's approach to this work, is we are very much an all of above. We are agnostic. We think employee ownership in all forms needs to be advanced in every way, and we want to be a part of doing that. Which leads me to another quote. For those of you who were part of the Piton lunch conversation, we had not one but two people saying that they are in love with EOTs. So I think that's another another interesting way of capturing the passion of this movement. But the thing that I want to end on is another quote from yesterday. On the panel, Greg Graves talked about how the success of employee ownership is predictable. And he was talking specifically about ESOPs and the data and all of that. But I would like to suggest that the success of employee ownership across the board is predictable. It needs to be predictable because of all the work that you're doing. And now, as the prior speaker said, we need to make sure that we're not the only ones who know this and are talking about it, but are really sharing it and spreading the word. I know I am very inspired. Regina and I have lots of follow-up conversations now about, who needs to know more about this work at JPMorgan Chase. I know you're all going to be taking things back to your work. This was such an exciting 2 days, and just thank you all very much for the work that you do.